Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you listened to my story. Please give me a follow and like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment and provide feedback so I can improve the sound quality. Yes, we invite you to listen to part 8 of the series. Chapter 80, 75. Little Sue L's Change, 1. Chapter 75. Little Sue L's Change, 1. The eagle's cry broke through the sky and shrouded Mount Meru in the depths of winter. The eagles flew across the sky, flapping their wings and flying towards the west between the golden pillars that were illuminated by the sunlight. Xia Ji sat cross-legged on the back of a golden eagle with his eyes closed, his black hair fluttering in the wind. Huixin sat beside him and looked at His Highness, who was sitting in the sunlight. She also closed her eyes and did not speak. As she cultivated with His Highness, she felt extremely calm. It was difficult for a demon to achieve the great Tao, which meant that the path of cultivation was bound to be even more difficult. Therefore, she especially treasured His Highness. If she had originally decided to form an alliance with him because of Xia Xiaosu's kindness, now she had already been convinced by the seventh prince. When he was in the Eagle clan, the Eagle King had healed his state of mind after reciting the Xia Ji mantra. This time, he was on the verge of being shocked and shattered. It was a blessing in disguise. From there, he had glimpsed the higher realm of the Eagle clan's martial arts, so he went into seclusion. Before he went into seclusion, the golden-robed Eagle King had sent a trusted general to be the seventh prince's mount. If the seventh prince had only shown his powerful strength to convince him, then he would at most be afraid. At most, he would only send an ordinary eagle demon and settle the matter unwillingly. However, ever since his spiritual energy merged with that vast spiritual energy, the weight of the seventh prince of Great Shang in his heart had changed completely. The Eagle King had already considered himself as a disciple, and after learning that the Fox King had also converted to this prince, the Eagle King completely let go of the last trace of arrogance in his heart. The golden eagle flew over the towering mountains, turning the undulating path into a straight line. The next morning, they arrived at the entrance of Mount Meru. Huixin was the first to open his eyes. He looked at his feet and could not help but reveal a strange expression. "Your Highness, there are many soldiers at the entrance of Mount Meru. They are forming a shield formation to block the only passage." The eagle lowered. Xia Ji saw many martial artists and soldiers confronting each other. The soldiers surrounded 5 layers. The first 2 layers held large shields, and behind the 2 layers of shield walls were spearmen and crossbowmen. Behind these 4 layers were armored soldiers. Behind the armored soldiers were many soldiers in small formations. Looking down, there were a total of 20,000 soldiers. The general behind the formation was Deng Gongjiu, who had been possessed. There were a few handsome guards beside Deng Gongjiu. One look and one could tell that he was a fox spirit in disguise. These guards were wrapped around a young girl riding on a white horse. The young girl was wrapped in a pale golden robe. Even though she was surrounded by thousands of soldiers and dressed in gorgeous clothes, the desolate aura condensed on her body could not be dissipated. She was weak and small as she sat on the white horse. She was Xia Xiaosu. The martial artists who were surrounded tried to rush out, but they would be shot back by arrows every time. Those who did not believe in evil and insisted on rushing forward would be shot to death. Some who were able to rush forward would also be blocked by the shield wall and killed by spears. A sharp eagle cry sounded. Everyone looked up. The golden light was dazzling. 2 figures descended from the sky. Many crossbows immediately aimed at the person who was falling. The cold light flickered and the sound of the trigger filled with killing intent rang out. The handsome guards beside Xia Xiaosu also drew their swords and blocked the princess. However, when they saw who it was, they hurriedly put away their swords and wanted to call out Ancestor Huixin. However, they immediately remembered their current status and hurriedly kept silent. Xia Xiaosu also saw the youngster and shouted, "It's the seventh prince." As soon as he finished speaking, all the crossbows shifted their direction. Xia Ji glanced at the army. Little Su and Huxian were able to control it to such a degree. It was not easy, and this possessed fox was actually able to control the army. It was obvious that he was also proficient in the art of war. It seemed that the demon race had made preparations for this day. Xia Xiaosu got off the horse. Although her hands were trembling, her posture was valiant. She walked up to Xiaji, lowered her head, and called out softly, "Big brother." Xiaji smiled as he ruffled her hair. "You received the news and were worried about me, so you led your troops here." The ninth princess nodded and glanced at the beautiful nun behind her brother. Huixin smiled and nodded at her. Xia Xiaosu asked, "Who is she? Why are you by my brother's side?" Xia Ji told her about Huixin's identity and what had happened in the mountains. Xia Xiaosu was relieved when she heard that it was a fox demon. Xia Ji could feel his little sister secretly heave a sigh of relief and could not help but ask curiously, "What happened to you?" "Nothing." Xia Xiaosu replied softly, then took a step forward and said, "Surrender, or die." Her voice wasn't loud, but some soldiers quickly spread her words. The confrontation and killing did not last long. During this period, the martial artists of the pugilistic world either died or were captured. After that, many martial artists who escaped from Mount Meru were also captured. In the current situation, there was an army in front, Thundersound Monastery in the back, demons from the tiger and fox races in the north, and eagle demons hovering in the sky to help watch. As long as these eagle demons did not show their human forms, no one would know that they were demons. They would think that they were waiting to eat the corpses. Even though the warriors who appeared in the forest claimed that the seventh prince was colluding with the demons, no one believed them, especially when Monk Zazai of Thundersound Monastery proved that the seventh prince had been eating vegetarian food and chanting Buddha in the temple to calm his mind. "Why did you capture these people?" Xia Ji asked. His original plan was to disperse these people and then kill the martial artists who had escaped from Mount Meru. Even if the rest spread the news, it was not enough to be afraid. Moreover, he could also spread the opposite rumors. Anyway, it was just a verbal canon. "I see that you're collecting books. Besides the scriptures, you must also be collecting them for cultivation techniques. Therefore, I emptied out the original 18-story stargazing tower in the Imperial City and used it as a prison to imprison these martial artists. I asked them to write their own martial arts manuals and give them to my brother. And leaking the sect's cultivation method is a big taboo. These martial artists who betrayed their sect will never be able to return. I can just take them in and use them for us." "Who taught you that?" Xia Xiaosu thought for a moment. "This world taught me." She thought for a while and suddenly said, "Huxian Er and I have talked many times. She said that my name is too soft and soft to the point that it can't shock others. She hoped that I could change it. I thought about it for a long time and felt that what she said made sense. Big brother needs to focus on cultivation and can't waste his energy on these trivial matters, so I'm here. These days, when I was free, I would always think, the end of the year is coming in a few days. If there's no ancestral dragon immersion, I'm afraid there won't be any. I'm afraid she's just an ordinary girl whose ancestors abandoned her. Since I can't compare to all my royal brothers and sisters, I can at least make myself look stronger. This starts with my name." The thin and pale girl looked up at Xia Ji, her eyes filled with determination. While the two of them were talking, there was a commotion in the distance. Clearly, another group of martial artists had arrived. The ninth princess subconsciously tilted her head, and her eyes froze. She saw Yan Ling. "Elder brother, that woman. I've seen her. I won't approve of such a sister-in-law." Xia Xiaosu looked very serious. Xia Ji ruffled her hair and teased, "Then what do you think?" "Xia Xiaosu, she's beautiful, sensible, skilled in martial arts, smart, and knows how to live. Most importantly, she's gentle and considerate, and she treats you wholeheartedly." Xia Ji coughed. "You're dreaming." Everyone from the Green Cliff Manor was stunned when they saw this scene. Some people saw Xia Ji and Xia Xiaosu in the crowd, then looked at the corpses on the ground and the martial artists in iron handcuffs in the distance. They were dumbfounded. "Yan Ling, please go and beg the seventh prince to let us go," a disciple said softly. "That's right, senior sister Yan. You're friends with that prince. He'll listen to you. We can make a great heart demon oath and not tell anyone about what happened in the past few days." The group of disciples who had mocked Yan Ling suddenly changed their attitude. "You've been complaining about him all the way here. Are you going to plead for mercy now?" Yan Ling asked. "Senior Yan, is this the time to talk about this? Hurry up and beg for mercy." That's right, senior sister Yen. We're all from the same sect. Even if we talk a little, it's just a chat. It's just a joke. Yen Ling was forced to walk out. She took a few steps towards the shield formation and shouted, "I would like to see the seventh prince." Just as Xia Ji was about to step forward, he was pushed back by a small hand. Xia Xiaosu angrily jumped onto her horse and rode out. She stood behind the shield formation and shouted, "Not good." Yen Ling looked up. She obviously knew Xia Xiaosu. They had met in the imperial city. "You still have the face to come in front of us after what you've done?" Xia Xiaosu said directly. "Don't say anything today. Surrender, or else." She pointed at the corpses of the warriors on the ground and said coldly, "Kill them all." Her voice was very weak and soft, but it carried a special power that made Yen Ling unable to continue speaking. At this moment, Yen Ling felt that the little girl who used to be weak and loved to cry had changed. The royal family was filled with dragons and phoenixes. It was not that they did not fly, but the time had not come. If the wind and clouds met, they would soar into the 9 heavens. The 7th Highness was the 9th princess, that was true. Chapter 81, 76. Nothing like before. Chapter 81, 76. Nothing like before. 3 days later, the monks of light and martial artists of the pugilistic world who entered Mount Meru were either dead or captured. The rest could not escape the pursuit even if they hid in the dense forest. Huixin returned to the White Fox clan. She wanted to cultivate with his Highness and pursue the Great Tao, but the clan needed her to preside over it. On the other hand, Master Black Fox was able to kill easily. Qi Shanjuan had betrayed her and died. Her original killing intent was also dispelled by Xia Po, and she only targeted that heartless man. She repaid kindness and revenge. His Highness had never stopped her. She transformed into a charming maid and followed Xia Ji to his side, awaiting his orders. She had already pledged allegiance to his Highness, and as long as she followed his Highness, she would have a chance to meet that Marquis sooner or later. When that time came, she would definitely chop him into minced meat and make him into a meat patty to vent her hatred. On the road back in the depths of winter, the army escorted many prisoners. The 2 horses were lagging behind. His hooves clattered on the ground. Xia Ji turned his head and glanced at the thin princess. Xia Xiaosu raised her head slightly, her pale skin revealing a sickly beauty. "I've never seen you speak so fiercely before," Xia Ji said. "No matter what, I hate her for hurting you. Even if she has all kinds of reasons and grievances, I still hate her. Actually, nothing happened between us. She was just a chess piece that happened to appear there. If it wasn't her, it would have been someone else. The real mastermind was the 2nd princess. Xia Yun." Xia Xiaosu let out a sigh of relief. She was used to this kind of information that was full of suspense. No matter how the world changed, as long as she became stronger, it would be fine. Her brother wanted to use his strength to suppress the world, so she had to be his strongest support. Moreover, she still had the world in her heart. This ridiculous thought made her empathize with the people who were starving and frozen to death under the bridge every night. She sobbed in her bed. Therefore, for these things that she had to do, she would change herself and become bold enough to go against any kind of existence. The 2 of them did not continue Xia Yun's topic. "Brother, I've already thought of a name to change," said Xia Xiaosu. Xia Ji waited for the answer. "Jie," said Xia Xiaosu. Xia Ji was stunned. He recalled some things from his previous life. Was this the Shang of the parallel world, but was it also destined to be destroyed? He turned his head to look at his royal sister. She was pale and desolate. She was as small as a white plum in the corner of the wall, but she had to be called Xia Jie. Should he give a hint that it was best not to call her by that name? For example, Zhao or something like that. If he used a word like, in the future, when the other party's generals scolded him, they would forget how to pronounce the word for a moment and then stop cursing. Those who tried to curse would only be humiliated and laughed at by others. Would they win the morale of the army before the battle even started? A thought flashed across Xia Ji's mind. "Do you like this word? I think this name is very domineering. It should be able to suppress others." Xia Xiaosu didn't have much confidence. I like it too. Xia Xiaosu smiled as well. Xia Ji raised his head and looked at the distant sky. He recalled the conclusion that he was an anomaly. Strange number in Xia Jie. So what? The 18-story stargazing tower had already been transformed into a prison. Some of the original restrictive mechanisms had been used as defensive measures, and the third floor of the ground floor was used by martial artists on duty. Outside the tower, there were soldiers patrolling day and night. Xia Ji walked along the winding stairs. In a cell at the top of the tower, Yan Ling, who was wearing a prisoner's uniform, was leaning against the cold wall. She looked at the bronze sparrow oil lamp on the wall diagonally opposite her and thought that it might be best if she died like this. Ah! Not far away, a martial artist's painful cry suddenly sounded. It was the sound of being interrogated. This interrogation was very effective. Many martial artists had already surrendered and began to write their own sect's secret manuals. It was almost his turn. Yan Ling thought to herself as she grabbed the white fish pendant with her left hand. Perhaps only the power of her dead mother could give her some warmth. Clang. At this moment, the metal chain rang, making an ear-piercing sound. Yan Ling looked up and saw a person standing in front of the door. A youth. He wore a dark gold jacket inside and a black python robe outside. It was Xia Ji. The two of them looked at each other through the prison door, and Yan Ling turned her head away. The jailer unlocked the door and chased the other female martial artists out. His Highness was here to visit. How could there be anyone else around? Some of the female warriors were from the Green Cliff Manor. When they saw this scene, they immediately understood and hurriedly said, "Senior Sister Yan, don't forget about me." The rest of them also roughly understood Yan Ling's identity, so they all shouted, "Miss Yan, it's fate that we can be in the same room. Please, come out quickly." The jailer urged the martial artists. The martial artists were shackled and shackled. This kind of shackle was specially developed for martial artists. There were needles hidden in the cuffs. The length of the needles was not too much. If true qi was circulated in the meridians and slightly bulged, the needles would directly pierce the meridians and cripple them. The material of this needle was also very special. Unless it was a legendary expert, it was impossible to break the shackles with the brutal training method. This was not enough. Any martial artist who entered the prison would be fed with drugs like tendon softening powder every day. In short, unless it was a legend in Jianghu, it was impossible to escape. "Your Highness, please." The jailer looked at the seventh prince ingratiatingly. Xia Ji walked through the prison door and sat in front of Yan Ling. "Greetings, seventh prince." Yan Ling's voice was neither cold nor warm. "You should understand that it's unrealistic to let you go," Xia Ji said. "So, don't say such things. However, you and I once had a friendship on the streets of the imperial city. This friendship allows me to give you one more choice." "What choice?" "Relax your mind. I'll recite a sutra to calm you down." When Yan Ling heard the words, chanting, her heart twitched. She had not had a good life in the past 3 years, but was this prince good? If he hadn't broken out of the situation himself, he would have died long ago, right? "I'm sorry." Her voice softened and sounded apologetic. Xia Ji said, "In this chaotic world, the weak are pawns. They are manipulated by the strong and stirred up by the wind and clouds. Their actions, words, and thoughts are not up to them. What's there to be sorry about? Do you want to listen to my chanting?" Yan Ling nodded. Although she didn't understand the function of chanting scripture, she could at least get a glimpse of this person's past. Only then could they have a common topic. With a topic, the broken friendship could be slowly repaired. She no longer had any relatives. Only this person in front of her could make her miss him and feel pain. Xia Ji sat cross-legged under the sunlight shining through the prison window. His eyes were clear as he chanted a scripture. His voice was neither fast nor slow, neither high nor low. It was as calm as an ocean current. Because it was deep, there was no noise or agitation. A moment later, he had already finished reciting the scriptures. Yan Ling had been listening with her guard down from the beginning. It was precisely because of this that she quickly felt that vast spirit. In front of that spirit, he was like a pool of water. She felt that the prince in front of her had really changed. He was clearly sitting opposite her, only a foot away, but the distance between them could not be described as the difference between heaven and earth. Looking at him was like looking at the sky, and she could feel how small she was. She closed her eyes for a long time. The small pool of water in her heart finally merged into the sea. A strange sense of security surged into her heart. At the same time, she also understood that the young man in front of her was no longer an old friend. In less than 3 years, what level had he climbed to? After 3 years, nothing was like before. Could it be that he was born for this chaotic world? Many thoughts surged into her mind, but as her spirit deepened, an extremely strong sense of inferiority surged out from the bottom of her heart. It was a spirit that was close to mighty power. How could he have a relationship with such an existence? How could she have a common topic with him? When she was still thinking about love, the other party was no longer thinking about these things. She opened her eyes and looked at the young man in front of her. His eyes were as deep as the sea. She felt even more ashamed of her inferiority. In an instant, she gave up on the thoughts of continuing love in her heart because she felt that she was no longer worthy. Hence, she began to ask some questions about cultivation techniques and her confusion. She asked, and Xia Ji answered. 2 hours had passed. After a long time, Yan Ling had already understood a lot. Looking at the young man in front of her, the emotions in her heart had also changed. It was a mixture of inferiority and respect, as well as many complicated emotions. Your Highness. Yan Ling shouted again, wanting to say something. Call me teacher from now on, Xia Ji interrupted her. This form of address directly cut off all possibilities between the two of them and also put an end to the karma that had once existed. Teacher and student could only be teacher and student. Yan Ling was stunned and bit her lips. Although she felt much calmer, she still felt a little pained when she heard this. However, it was already a great opportunity to be accepted as a disciple by a legendary warrior. Moreover, she had long lost her feelings and sense of belonging to the Green Cliff Manor. So what if she betrayed it? Yan Ling greets teacher, she said. When she raised her head again, her face was replaced with a mocking expression. Xia Ji wasn't surprised. He said calmly, Xia Yun. At this moment, Yan Ling asked curiously, You actually haven't killed her yet? He didn't sleep with her either. Little brother, are you still a man? Chapter 82, 77. Why did it break? Chapter 82, 77. Why did it break? Little brother, with your personality, you must still be a virgin now. Do you want me to teach you a lesson today? Yan Ling licked her lips seductively, her eyes extremely alluring. Xia Yun, I'll be more interested if you do it yourself. Yan Ling was stunned for a moment before she giggled and said, Yo, you actually want to sleep with your own sister? Are you even human? Xia Ji looked at her speechlessly. The second princess was either a pervert or she had been suppressed in the Haoran Taoist sect for a long time. She usually looked like a fairy-like fairy, but she actually looked like this. However, she was also certain that no matter what she said or did with Yan Ling's body, there would be no consequences, so she was so unscrupulous. Did you come to find me just to say this? Xia Yun was very frank and admitted it directly. I'm just bored. Otherwise, I would have lost this chess piece long ago. I didn't keep it for intelligence or anything else. It's just pure boredom. Anyway, no matter what I do with this body, no one will think of me. Even if you tell them, no one will believe you. Was this maintaining the dignity of the main account and then using the side account to have fun? Have you eaten lunch? Xia Yun suddenly asked. Xia Ji didn't answer. I can't think of anything for dinner. What do you recommend? Xia Yun asked again. Xia Ji still didn't answer. Why does the ancestral dragon favor you so much? Xia Yun asked again. Xia Ji stood up and prepared to leave. I guess the ancestral dragon wants to make you a better whetstone, Xia Yun said with a smile. After saying this, she was waiting for this little brother to ask, who is the new king? Who is the chosen one? Then she could very straightforwardly say, if you come to me, I'll tell you. Then, the little brother would definitely not come to her. Then, she could loudly laugh at him for not being a man. Then, he would either be angry or really come to her. Oh, what if they really came? That would be too exciting. For a moment, Xia Yun rested his chin on his hand and fell into deep thought. As expected, Xia Ji paused. Be careful not to break the knife. Xia Yun gave him a thumbs up. I like villains like you. By the way, can you continue with the story of the condor shooting legend that you told when you were young? A few days ago, I was still thinking about the Quanjin sex story and even went to investigate the relationship between the 9-in true qi and the 9-in mantra. In the end, LT's alright. Xia Yun didn't think that this royal brother would come back. She was just making a verbal attack. Xia Ji, who was about to leave, suddenly turned his head and sat down in front of Xia Yun, who was staring at him with her mouth agape. Then, he began to talk. The old mischievous child said, my senior brother lifted the coffin and pointed at the old poisonous creature with his pure yang hand. The old poisonous creature was shocked. He clearly saw my senior brother pass away, so why did he suddenly fly out of the coffin? That's because my senior brother faked his death. Xia Ji began to explain. Xia Yun began to listen with great interest. After listening for a while, he said, tell me more about Guojing and Yang Kong. I'm optimistic about this pair. Xia Ji said unhurriedly. After speaking for the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, he reached a high point. When the tide rose, Yan Ling suddenly looked uncomfortable. She struggled and woke up from a nightmare. She let out a high-pitched moan and opened her eyes in a daze. She looked at Xia Ji blankly. What happened to me just now? There's a demon inside you, Xia Ji said. She can take over your body at any time, so you can't leave for the time being. However, I'll ask the jailer to arrange a single room for you. Yan Ling was stunned for a moment. She knew that there was another soul interfering in her body. When she looked again, the prince had already left. She opened her mouth and spat out the word Xia. However, after a long time, an extremely strong sense of inferiority rushed up from the bottom of her heart. She sighed and said softly, farewell, teacher. At this moment, in an unknown area far away, a white-robed fairy who was sitting quietly among the mountains suddenly clenched her fists and pounded the ground in extreme pain. Damn it, why did it disappear at the critical moment? That Guojing had unintentionally memorized the 9-in mantra and was about to go act tough. How could he not act tough? How could this be? Damn broken chapter Mountain Ointment. It was said that Shanae was a wild beast on Mount Ku. It was red like cinnabar fire, could speak human language, and loved to curse. Therefore, comparing humans to Shanae was to vent a kind of emotion in the bottom of one's heart. The white-robed fairy said something that did not match her immortal aura at all. There was no one around anyway. If there was someone, she would be a fairy, high and mighty. After saying that, she paused for a few seconds before she suddenly came to her senses and said speechlessly, oh no, I was too engrossed in listening to him. He tested out the time of borrowing a body to exchange a soul. The reason why Xia Ji was telling the story was to test out the time it took for an incense stick to burn. Since he had already tried it, he could not continue telling stories to the second princess next time. The palace was empty. All the concubines had been sent back by Xia Xiaosu, and those who wanted to go south to find the emperor had followed them. However, the emperor had left without taking them with him. These concubines were not blindly loyal, and the princess had let them go as a kind gesture. Even if she did not admit it, she knew it in her heart. Once the concubines left, the entire harem became extremely deserted. A large number of palaces were empty. Other than the palace maids and eunuchs who were left to keep the place clean, there was nothing else. It was cold and cheerless. Xia Xiaosu's change of name naturally required a ceremony. She still used her original name and sat in the royal study. Many officials and generals in the city were led in by the guards to report to the princess about the situation in the city. This ancient imperial capital actually started to slowly operate again. Xia Ji was curious as to why these officials would report to Xia Xiaosu. But soon, his doubts were resolved. The unconcealed sound of wheels rattling came from the dark alley. Xia Ji didn't even turn his head and knew who it was. Before he could speak, the person had already spoken. From now on, there will no longer be Crown Prince Xia Guchen, only Yama Guchen. A man wearing a mysterious mask slowly walked out of the alley. I once had a great opportunity and obtained 7 masks. The masks came from the land of peril, and each of them contained the power of enlightenment. Anyone who wears them will receive the corresponding inheritance and enlightenment. If you want, I'll give you the mask of the Chakravarti king. I'll chant for you, Xiaji said. Gu Chen was stunned. Although he didn't understand what it meant, he naturally wouldn't agree. If you don't want it, then forget it. The wheelchair slowly moved to Xiaji's side, and together with him, they looked at the distant watching lake. I've given all my resources to the 9th princess, but I'm no longer acting as the crown prince. Those resources are all reliable resources that have something to use against her. With them around, Xia Xiaosu can take control of this imperial city. Gu Chen said faintly, I can see that she is very desperate. If she continues to maintain her current attitude, with her current comprehension ability, she is qualified to sit in a position that neither you nor I can sit in. Or do you want to be the emperor? Xia Ji shook his head. He didn't want to be the emperor. He understood that the crown prince had come today to share information and to strengthen the alliance, so he only needed to listen quietly. In fact, there are many nobles who don't get along with the emperor. Not all the forces are on his side, but these people are just waiting. If you can return from the north bank of the great river in March, those greedy foxes will appear. These foxes were the alliance of the great clans and were made up of many core figures. Even the emperor probably didn't know who these people were, but they had pushed out puppets to represent them. These puppets had the name of Marquis and were rewarded by the emperor. They also carried out their will and attended any official events. If this puppet was controlled by someone, it would die accidentally and then be replaced by another puppet. There were quite a few countries within the country. Great Shang had been established for 500 years, while the previous Yu kingdom had lasted for more than 2,000 years. Both dynasties had implemented the feudal system. Xia Ji, do you know why? Just tell me the truth, Xia Ji said. Because we can only implement the dukedom system, Gu Chen said. Many truly big families have existed for more than 500 years. Some families even existed in the early days of Yu dynasty. After 2 generations of dynasties, they have hidden themselves deeper and deeper. And the things they controlled were also increasing. These were true hidden countries, countries within countries. Compared to Guifang's frost giant, or even all the other races, the alliance of these large families was even more terrifying. They didn't care at all when enemies came. It wasn't because they couldn't defeat them, but because they were afraid of exhausting themselves. They didn't think it was necessary. In any case, this country was vast, and the foreign races had the power to come in and plunder, but they could not have the power to defend the country. Just treat it as a locust plague. Who would fight the frost giants in winter? However, when they fought among themselves, their intelligence and emotional intelligence would be raised by 100 times. The power they displayed would be presented to you in a way that you had never imagined, making you exclaim, why didn't you use such a powerful force when the enemy invaded? The country wasn't weak, but it allowed the foreign tribes to invade it, because no matter how much the foreign tribes invaded, they couldn't harm their interests. No matter how they choose to stand, I will only stand on the same front as you. Therefore, I came today in the hope of strengthening our alliance. Let's exchange a move, Xia Ji said. We don't need magic tools. Gu Chen was stunned for a moment, then he nodded, all right. After saying the word okay, Gu Chen made his move. A thunderous explosion of energy erupted around him, and a huge ice python Dharma appeared around him. His palm pressed forward, and the ice python also poked its head forward. At this moment, the snake in the Dharma idol stuck out its tongue and opened its 2 forks. With a twist of its fingers, a strange talisman appeared out of thin air. The talisman was wrapped with the terrifying power of life and death, like Yama flipping through the book of life and death in the cold hell. Xia Ji didn't say anything else. He made a gesture with his right hand, and the black Buddhist light formed the image of the Ming King. The 18 levels of hell merged into the image of 100 ghosts and 9 suns appeared in the Ming King's hand. Ming Wang, hell, sun, 3 in 1. Gu Chen looked embarrassed. He took the initiative to disperse his energy and said bitterly, I'm not fighting anymore. I'm not your match. P.S. I'm weekly asking for recommendation votes. Chapter 83, 78. Controlling the Imperial Capital, 1. Chapter 83, 78. Controlling the Imperial Capital, 1. Listen to me recite a sutra. All right then. Let go of your defenses. What? You still want to let go of your guard? Right, let go of your guard and listen to me recite a scripture. If you are willing to wear the hell mask I gave you, I am willing to let go of my guard and listen to your chanting. Really? Forget it. Guchen looked at the eagerness of his mysterious seventh brother and immediately dismissed the idea. This won't do, that won't do, Xiaji said. What do you think we should do? Guchen was silent for a moment. I understand what you are thinking. Trust is hard to build. But besides the common enemy, we also have the bond of the ninth princess. Oh. Would you trust my sister? I've never seen anyone cry while looking at refugees. She wasn't putting on a show, but when she was strolling alone by Huaqing Lake, she heard some crying in the distance. When she was young, she would bandage injured animals and deliberately scatter some rice grains in the grass for the sparrows to eat. On the hunting ground, even if she was afraid, she still stopped the emperor from shooting a female deer because the female deer was pregnant with a young deer. In the past, I looked down on this kind of method. I felt that all the killing in the world was for profit. There were many people who wore masks and pretended to cry, but there were almost no people who cried out their true feelings like her. After crying, there were more pedantic scholars and soft-hearted women, but there were even fewer people like her who could become stronger after wiping away their tears. Xia Xiaosu was more qualified than anyone else to sit in that position. Trust takes time. I will stop in the Imperial City, but not in the Imperial Palace. During this period of time, I will build the Netherworld. Wait until March. I will also go south and kill Tianzi before you do. Master, you actually brought Black Fox King. Do you want us sisters to play the flute for you? Huxian Air ran over from afar, her legs bare. Xia Ji handed her a flute and pointed at a large rock. Play it for a night. Master, I was just joking. Blowing for a night. Xia Ji would never hold back against this vixen who was good at making lewd remarks. As the melodious flute played, he poured a pot of fine wine and sat under the starry sky in winter, reviewing his actions for the past half a month. Firstly, after reading the Thunder Sound Temple's scriptures, he had improved his hidden strength as a whole, enriched his trump card library, and left behind a few powers that had yet to be displayed in front of the world. Secondly, before the war, he had gone to scout out the demons of the northern reaches and gained complete control of the fox race, the tiger race, and the eagle race. Although there were 81 groups of demons, such control was already considered to be in place. It could be considered to have removed the danger of this foreign tribe ally. Otherwise, if he fought at the front line, and later on, there were rumors that the demons controlled the imperial capital and even the imperial sister, what would that count for? Now, there were less than 2 months left until March. Although the demons were pacified. However, there were still many hidden dangers within the imperial city. The rear was unstable. Xia Ji tapped his fingers on the table as he thought of a solution. Pa! His fingers suddenly stopped. Spread a word. Let all the martial artists in the capital know. Say that Prince Shenwu will start preaching at the stargazing platform in 3 days. Any martial artist who has cultivated Xiantian true qi can come and listen. As soon as he finished speaking, a ball of black smoke flashed in the darkness. A beautiful female attendant appeared and walked slowly behind him, swaying her waist. She replied in a delicate voice, "Yes, Your Highness." Then, King Black Fox grabbed the prince's shoulders with his soft hands and gently pinched him with his hands that had killed countless people. Xia Ji allowed her to pinch him. It was time for Killer's report. King Black Fox glanced at Huxian, who was standing on a big rock and playing the flute. He raised his eyebrows, winked, and smiled. Then, he slowly said, "The interrogators that the little princess found are really good. They have a good grasp of people's hearts and torture, but none of the captured light monks are willing to say anything." Those martial artists had already handed over many secret manuals, and these secret manuals were currently being compiled into a book. When there were 300 of them, they would be sent over to His Highness to have a look. Secondly, there was a response to the 3 Moons River agreement that His Highness passed down a month ago. Now, the Emperor of the Southern Dynasty has replied with, "I'll wait for you." This can be considered as accepting the invitation. You demons have lived in the northern lands for so long. Do you know what kind of power the royal family has? Xia Ji asked. Shashing came over, his body almost sticking to his back. He breathed like an orchid and wanted to speak into his ear. Vixens were like this, they started to be flirtatious after a few words. Xia Ji pointed at a large rock in the distance. Let's talk upstairs. Killing. Hu Xian blew her flute and looked at Black Fox King, who was also punished. To stand beside her. Her eyes curved into a crescent moon, and she raised her eyebrows. She smiled and continued to blow her flute. Killer said softly, Your Highness, I still want to be with you, report properly. Xia Ji rubbed the space between his eyebrows. He was wrong. It wasn't Hu Xian who liked to talk dirty. It was the fox spirit race who liked it. No wonder he was respectfully addressed as teacher by the fairies. Fortunately, Huixin wasn't. That Fox King was really devoted to pursuing the Tao. He couldn't have been wrong. Send me the same message, Xia Ji said. Killer was helpless and could only tell him. The imperial capital originally had 8 divisions. The first was the cabinet, which helped to deal with the world's political affairs. The second division, the Ministry of War, was where the generals were. The third division, the Heavenly Craftsmanship Division, was to develop puppet weapons and warships. The fourth division, the Righteous Chi Palace, openly monitored the officials. Fifth, Anika Manor, secretly monitoring the officials. The sixth division, the Inspector Heavenly Division, monitored the martial world. The seventh division, Blackwater Platform, dealt with major cases. The eighth part, the Department of Heaven Supervision, observing the stars. The rest are the local governments. She was speechless. Because she felt that what she said was equivalent to not saying anything. She was just a vixen. Why would she care about political affairs? Moreover, there were many hidden countries and countries within countries in this world. These superficial forces were like trees growing in the abyss. The most important thing was where the roots of this tree led to and how deep they went. Xia Ji understood and stopped asking. He leaned back and took a sip of the wine. He turned his head and saw that the light in the royal study was still on. The lake wind blew past his temples and through the thousands of holes in the rockery and strange stones, bringing with it the sound of sobbing in the deep winter, which swept into the study courtyard. He saw the candlelight behind the oil paper window jump, and he saw the girl sitting on the throne stretch her back. That position was too heavy for her. Xia Ji took out a book and looked at the 2 vixens standing on the rock. He began to read softly. He had to learn every day and replenish his skill orbs. Stargazing Tower. Not many people came to the training hall, only 1,000 or so. This was understandable. After all, they were afraid. Xia Ji didn't think much of it. He sat on the stage and began to preach. He used the connection of the Tathagata Dhyana to attach his spiritual mark to his words. Anyone who could accept it would inherit his spiritual mark, and he could also feel the existence of this person. His goal was very simple, and that was to sow seeds. The most terrifying thing about the spiritual imprint was the imperceptible sense of identity and belonging. Once they accepted his Tao, they would be biased towards him. In the future, no matter what the situation was, these martial artists would feel that what he did was reasonable. If they became enemies with him, they would feel guilty. This kind of guilty was at most guilt to ordinary people, but it was an obstacle to the state of mind of martial artists. After the battle, the martial artists below the stage were left with endless aftertastes, and Xia Ji had already left. After that, he came to the stargazing platform to preach once every 7 days. More and more people were listening. At first, they didn't come because they were worried that Prince Shenwu would use the Tao lecture as an excuse for other purposes. However, after 2 attempts, everyone finally understood that the prince was sincere in preaching. It was common knowledge that one should not pass on the Tao easily. However, the prince was actually able to share his experience with everyone. Some warriors even dared to ask questions. The prince did not take it lightly. He answered in public and some warriors wanted to ask questions in private. The prince agreed with them one by one. This was really rare. Gradually, for some reason, many martial artists began to respect this Prince Shenwu. They even wanted to stand up for him when they heard others speak ill of him. These people were Xia Ji's hidden disciples. He made a simple list and gave it to Hu Xian. When necessary, this vixen would even personally step forward to help these hidden disciples gain more power in their respective factions. Days like this passed for more than a month. Xia Ji's daily life was very monotonous. He made magic tools, read books to extract skill orbs, tried his best to find out news about the south, gave lectures every week, and ate with Xia Xiaosu. During this month, there were actually quite a number of warriors who had secretly surrendered. They were in various forces, and those who had reached the 8th realm or above of the ancient realm were silently selected. They met with Slaughter and began to call Slaughter Black Fox Taoist brother. This was the first batch of seeds that had sprouted, and it was also just the beginning. If it bore fruit, then it would be the teacher of the Imperial City's martial artists. Seeing that everything was on track, Xia Ji heaved a sigh of relief. The alliance was stable. The Imperial City was stable. Only then could he go south. Yeah, we're heading south soon. Turning his head, he saw the setting sun at the end of the road, a furnace that burned everything. In the west, the setting sun was like blood. Guifang's army had already left the Wolf Sealing Pass. Tu Luo brought the Frost Giant to the Wolf Sealing Pass. They needed to leave Great Shang before spring arrived. However, at this moment, a handsome monk slowly walked out from the south of the Wolf Sealing Pass. Behind the monk was an army of tens of thousands of iron cavalry. The general in the lead held a long saber and wore a black gauze hat. His face was covered and could not be seen clearly. Chapter 84, 79. A Destructive Blade, 1. Chapter 84, 79. A Destructive Blade, 1. Dus Tilia Tne Sky, Ona Tne Dones were Dunia many times. The blood-red twilight cast a shadow of over 100 feet on the ground. The Frost Giants saw the army, but they were not afraid. Ever since they had entered the Central Plains, no one had made them suffer a great loss except for the black-armored dwarf. Was it useful to have more people? They had already displayed their style, their level, and their confidence. Ordinary soldiers were nothing more than tickles. Although it was not a snowy day and he did not have the frost armor, he was not afraid of these ordinary soldiers. Can ants kill elephants? It wouldn't die. No matter how many soldiers came, it would only take a few blows. However, Tu Luo looked at the general in the lead, who was wearing a black veil and a bamboo hat, and felt an inexplicable uneasiness in his heart. The general was not burly or tall, but his entire body was tightly wrapped. Other than his eyes behind the black veil, even his fingers were covered in gloves. He looked very mysterious. She smelled an unusual aura, so she patted Rollo's ear and said, "Be careful." Then, she took out one of her spoils from the Central Plains. It was a magic tool obtained from the treasure map of the ancient ruins recorded by Guifang. LT was a yellow triangular flag. The cavalry army did not immediately charge. Instead, it was the handsome monk with peach blossoms on his face who took a step forward. His hands formed a seal. A Dharma idol appeared behind him. It held a lotus flower in its hand and had a sun wheel on its crown. A crow was flying in the middle of the sun wheel. He opened his arms, and the 9 suns appeared. With a tap of his right hand, the scorching suns shot into the sky. When the 9 suns rose into the sky, the crows in his Dharma form behind him also flew out, connecting the 9 suns together and forming a huge sun in the sky. The sunlight shone and instantly swept away the cold wind for more than 20 to 30 miles. Sweat oozed out of the monk's forehead. Clearly, it wasn't easy. However, the temperature was rising, as if spring had arrived early. At this moment, the mysterious general led the cavalry into a charge. Why would the frost giants be afraid of humans? Seeing the charge, the group of non-human giants who had already gained confidence raised their heavy weapons and faced each other head-on. In their imagination, once the two sides' waves collided, they would at most be knocked over by the cavalry's charge, and then they would get up and fight back. Even if the weather was a little hot and she was a little weak, it didn't matter. The cavalry galloped like thunder. The frost giant stomped on the ground like a drum. The earth shook. Suddenly, Queen Guifang's pupils constricted. She finally knew the source of her ominous premonition. The cavalry on the other side had already changed. His aura was getting stronger and stronger. After charging out for a few hundred meters, the army seemed to be on fire. After rushing out for another few hundred meters, the burning power actually rose up. An illusory figure appeared, and its height soared into the sky. A few hundred meters forward, the rising shadow had already turned into a terrifying 100-foot-tall Dharma idol. The Dharma idol was the image of the mysterious general. It wasn't burly or strong, but the moment it raised its blade, it stirred up the wind and clouds for 100 miles. Tu Luo hurriedly let out a strange roar, signaling the giants to scatter and run. However, it was already too late. The mysterious general swung his saber horizontally. The wind and clouds were cut off. The indescribable terrifying pressure rumbled down. The giant saber in the hands of the Dharma idol had the same frequency and arc as the mysterious general. Slash. Blood. Blood. Blood, blood, blood. With the blazing sun in the sky, the power of a single blade had actually killed more than half of the frost giants. All the frost blood, all the high-density skin, bones, and muscles were unable to block this attack. The frost giants were already petrified. Although they were powerful, they were timid and not good at fighting. At this moment, there was only one word left in their minds. Therefore, they turned around and ran around recklessly. Tu Luo was also within the range of the blade, but she used the earthen yellow flag's magic tool, which took her and Luo far away. The function of this small flag magic tool was to escape through the earth. This escape could be considered as a deserter, and he even directly escaped from the wolf sealing pass, but the remaining frost giants were still in the pass. On the other side. With a single slash, the 1,000-foot-tall Dharma idol also disappeared. The mysterious general casually stabbed his saber into the ground. Then, without even looking at the monk, he and his horse left into the distance, ignoring the 60,000 soldiers. At this moment, another black-armored deputy general stepped forward and shouted, "Thank you, Chi-Chi, for your help." The mysterious general didn't respond to them, and he quickly disappeared from everyone's sight. It was as if this person called Chi-Chi had come here to lead the 60,000 soldiers to kill that fierce and destructive blade. After that, he would leave. No one noticed that the face under the veil and bamboo hat had turned pale, and nearly 100 strands of hair had instantly grown on her head. To seize the power of heaven, one must consume one's lifespan. This slash was like a god waving his hand, but it also cut off nearly 10 years of his lifespan. How many years of lifespan did a person have? 100 years old is rare. How many blades could such a person slash in his life? 3 slashes. Or 4 slashes. In the distance, the beautiful and handsome monk could not help but sigh. This blade can make Guifeng not dare to enter Great Shang again for 30 years. It can be considered as a warning to the other races, making them not dare to act rashly. Truly amazing. What if Master faces this blade? The black-armored general asked. The monk shook his head. No matter who it is, they will die. The 8 wonders of Confucianism and Taoism live up to their reputation. Just now, he had only used the scorching light to disperse the cold, causing the frost giant to be weakened. The real main battlefield was completely the matter of Chi-Chi's slash. In an instant, he tore through everything with ease. In an instant, the outcome was decided. Where did Chi-Chi go? No one knew. According to the agreement, they couldn't pursue or question the 8 wonders, or else they would anger them. This was a hidden rule. The 8 wonders' identities could not be revealed to others, nor could they be investigated, questioned, or known. Otherwise, they would be the enemies of all the 8 wonders. Who was this 8 wonders? No one knew if it was old or young, or even if it was a man or a woman. These 8 wonders did not serve anyone, let alone the royal family. They only listened to their own beliefs. Master, can you chase after the remaining frost giants with me? The black-armored general asked. The handsome monk shook his head. I'm going to the north bank of the river to prepare. Then, I'll welcome someone in my best condition. He will come in 3 months, and I will ferry him in 3 months. The black-armored general knew who the monk was talking about and hurriedly bowed to bid farewell. The 60,000 cavalry, the handsome monk, and the mysterious general, the 3 forces clashed and dispersed. This could be considered to have saved Great Shang's face, or to have taken away the prestige of the divine martial prince. In the future, if someone were to say that Prince Shenwu defeated the frost giants, then someone would immediately reply, "What's the big deal?" The imperial court's army killed more than half of the giants in one go. Then, this glory would no longer be worth mentioning. As expected, this information was spread out in less than 2 days. Wind Cloud Tower's message spread like wildfire. The army went north and killed more than half of the frost giants with a single slash. Guifang has been completely defeated. Cheers rang out. The news reached the palace. Xia Ji was still sitting in the empty palace. Around him were piles of cultivation techniques and boxes of wooden beads. These were his daily training. Mastery of skills. Making magic tools. He had already experimented with it. If he used the magic tool continuously, its power would be slightly weakened the second time, and it would be completely destroyed the third time. If he used it every time and nourished it, it could be used for a long time. In this month, he had already completed his spiritual infiltration of the imperial capital's martial world and even the underground forces. Although the Inferno was also doing this work, the Inferno was not only targeting the imperial city, but also the surrounding areas. However, Crown Prince Guchen did not have the illegal power of spiritual imprint. He had many secrets and forces that he controlled when he was the Crown Prince. His return was not purely to explore the land. Instead, it was carried out in a half-wasteland and half-acceptance method. The Hell Mask was strong, but there was definitely a problem. Hence, Xia Ji was unwilling to accept it. Guchen wasn't willing to listen to Xia Ji's chanting either. Guchen said, "Wear my mask." Xia Ji said, "Listen to my chanting." The two of them actually expressed the same meaning. When he heard the news from the Wolf Ceiling Pass, Guchen instantly identified the monk. He sat in the dark with a ferocious and worried expression. He remembered who had pulled him out of the pile of corpses and who had taken care of him during those days, making him feel excited again. Tu Luo, don't let anything happen. His face, which was originally that of an evil ghost, was even more ferocious. He sent people to inquire about the whereabouts of Queen Guifang, but the journey was extremely far. He did not know how long it would take to go back and forth. 3 months were approaching, and he was destined to choose only one side. To search for Tu Luo's whereabouts, or to the north of the Great River. After a long time, Guchen's furious roar echoed in the dark secret chamber, "Tianzi, I will kill you." He had made his choice. At this moment, in the palace, in an empty hall, nearly 1,000 skill pearls floated between Prince's eyebrows, and at that moment, the light purple, 100 styles, was also among them. The prince was surrounded by 3 blood-colored Buddhas. The Buddhas pointed at him. With a single finger, he could overturn the spiritual world. And now, the constant mental power had brought about great comprehension. The red 3-life Buddhist dhyana could be fused. The dark red skill was obviously exhausted of mental power. Although it could not break through the 10th level, it had a change from the original pure fusion foundation. Creation. Chapter 85, Chapter 85, 80. Cicada shedding its shell, 1. Chapter 85, 80. Cicada shedding its shell, 1. Many skill orbs were driven by the immense mental power, fusing and rolling, just like the collision between particles at the beginning of the world. After half a day, the purple, 100 styles, merged with many skills to form the purple, 1,000 styles. But it did not stop. The number of forms is just a quantitative change. However, the true source of strength is not quantitative change, but qualitative change, so. Xia Ji clenched his right hand. The purple skill orb began to collapse and change under the pressure of the spiritual river. It was as if a star was being compressed. He suppressed it for a long time. A full day and night passed. The skill orb started to glow with a dark purple and a faint golden color, but it was not stable yet. This wasn't considered a mystic technique, but a move that was most compatible with one's own. It transformed the ideas of others and then created according to one's own thoughts. Once created, the power that could be unleashed far exceeded that of a move of the same level. But even so, it was still difficult to take shape. There were still some things missing. What was it? Xia Ji heaved a sigh of relief and lay back on the cold palace. A trace of opportunity that originated from my heart. He understood. The mystic style was natural, but if he wanted to create a mystic style that was most suitable for himself, other than accumulation and mental power, he also needed a power that came from the bottom of his heart. Strength is the essence of bones, muscles, skin, blood and qi. Qi was the 8 meridians dantian, which was qi. Spirit was God. However, other people's gods were ultimately other people's gods. Even if they were completely digested and transformed into their own, the original intention was still someone else's. There was ultimately a trace of disharmony. This was the outer God. Therefore, even though the 3 blood Buddhas stood around him, it was still as if they were separated by mountains and seas. If one wanted to reach the pinnacle of creation, one would need a true God. This required an opportunity. After resting for a while, he walked out of the hall. The sun was shining brightly outside the hall. Winter was about to pass, but spring had yet to arrive. At the end of February, below the city, Xia Ji stretched. There were 800 men of sacrifice who followed him south. These men of sacrifice were not robots. They had received Xia Ji's spiritual imprint long ago and their strength had improved greatly under the guidance of this legendary warrior. At this moment, they were scouting the way. Although there were some death squads in the previous battles, as long as one's mental power was strong enough, they could absorb more people who were willing to become death squads into the token. In any case, there were a total of 800. Among the newly added men of sacrifice, 30 of them were experts from the martial world of the imperial capital and even the underground world. Their strength had reached the 8th realm of Xiantian 4th stage, which was the ancient division of realms. This group of people pursued martial arts, but they had no way out. After receiving Xia Ji's spiritual mark, they followed him. Other than the old men who drove the carriage, the rest of the men of sacrifice had already spread out. They needed to gather information, sense the situation around them, and then quickly return to inform their masters. Xia Xiaosu stood at the bridgehead to bid farewell to Xia Ji. The wind was already a spring breeze. The princess straightened her brother's collar and then placed a painting in his arms. Her brother said that he wanted his mother to personally see the revenge. After doing all this, the two of them put some distance between them. Xia Xiaosu said, "I'll wait for you to come back. If you haven't seen my body, don't believe that I'm dead, no matter what," Xia Ji said. Got it. This time, when I went south, I was just gauging how high and thick the sky was. I've always been limited to the periphery of the imperial city and have never gone out for a walk. This trip might take a very long time. I know. This time, I'll go down south and find out everything. Fate is different, how much is destiny, so what if my martial arts are at the end of the line? And mother's death. If I can't fulfill my filial piety, then I'll be able to take revenge. At the mention of that woman, warm images flashed through Xia Xiaosu's mind. The scenes of spring, summer, autumn, and winter weaved into a picture, intertwined together, and now turned into a heavy drumstick that ruthlessly hit the drum of memories, making people's hearts tremble. She hugged her brother and wanted to say something, but when the words reached her mouth, they became, Tianzi, Consort Wan, Consort Zhen, Empress, Second Princess, Third Prince, Fifth Prince, Eighth Princess. These people are all very lucky. They are simply too powerful. Elder brother, you have to be careful. Xia Ji was stunned for a moment before he got into the carriage. Xia Xiaosu boarded the city gate tower and sent her brother off. She felt that her brother was acting strange today, but perhaps it was because he had been living in seclusion recently and there were too many things that he could not say when he sent her off. This path is destined for elder brother to walk alone. Since elder brother has always said that I am a poisonous healer, this is all that younger sister can help you with today. Xia Xiaosu sent the car away until it disappeared at the end of the road. She waved her hand and said, "Return to the palace." An elder brother had his own way. She already had her own path. In this life, if he didn't become a king, he would be a skeleton in the coffin. A group of female attendants transformed from demon foxes followed closely behind her. In a few more days, more demons would come. And she still needed to meet with many aristocratic families in the imperial city, and even those outside the imperial city. Some aristocratic families had already faintly revealed that there might be people from some large factions probing for marriage alliances. This marriage was not for Xia Xiaosu, but for her brother. Since that was the case, she wanted to take a good look at how big these major powers were and see if those marriage partners were qualified to become her brother's concubines. However, Huxian Air had also told her that these large factions were really huge. Xia Xiaosu suppressed her fear. This path was filled with trepidation, as if he was walking on thin ice. Xia Ji put down the curtain. It was an extremely long journey. The wheel drove away from the imperial capital. The driver was an old man, and he was disguised as a young master. As soon as he left the city, many scouts reported the news to the various factions. 7 days later, the carriage stopped in 3 cities, but there were already countless scouts secretly chasing after him. In the 3rd city, Xia Ji opened the door of his room after drinking in the inn. As soon as he entered the room, he exploded into a cloud of black smoke. The smoke dispersed, revealing the appearance of slaughter. The black fox rubbed her head in distress. It's really exhausting to pretend to be him every day, it's been so long, and the line of sight that should be disturbed has been disturbed. We can go back. If we continue walking, I'm afraid we'll attract some kind of opponent. She was just a vixen. Although she had some skills, she usually moved in the dark. Now that she was openly disguised as Prince Shenwu and heading south, she felt like she was sitting on pins and needles. Fortunately, His Highness allowed her to act for 7 days. After 7 days, she could return to the imperial city. Otherwise, she really did not know what to do. However, at this moment, a thunderous voice came from the street. I'm Ku Jian of the Great Light Temple. I'd like to meet Prince Shenwu. Then, she felt a terrifying aura envelop the entire inn. It was obvious that the person who came was very strong. Moreover, the Great Light Temple's method had killed the demon race. Even if she had mastered the heavenly fox transformation and almost revealed her dharma, she did not dare to go down and fight. Moreover, she was a demon. If she was discovered pretending to be the divine martial prince, she would be condemned endlessly. If she wasn't extremely good at controlling demonic chi, she might have been discovered here. King of Black Fox looked at the bronze mirror and encouraged, "Killing, you can do it." Thus, she imitated Xia Ji's tone and said coldly, "I'm tired. I won't see you today." The monk on the street did not mind. "Ku Jian will wait here for your Highness." After saying that, he sat cross-legged on the busy street. His heart was completely focused, as if he had merged with the light of the sunset. The Saraira of Guangming Temple could not be lost. He had come to ask for it back. It was getting late. Where was the real Xia Ji? He was currently standing in a Buddhist palace. He stood quietly in front of the bookshelf and flipped through the scriptures. It was already late at night, and there were no monks. In the scripture pavilion, the moonlight shone on the plaque hanging in front of the Buddha palace, with the words, Great Light Temple, written on it. In order to come here, he had spent a lot of effort. First of all, he went to ask the old tree demon on the 7th peak of Mount Meru. The tree demon said, because His Highness is an anomaly, he can't see His Highness's chi. But because of His Highness's killing intent, wherever he goes, he will leave black chi in the eyes of the chi watchers. After several experiments, he finally used his powerful mental power to restrain this killing intent. Then, a month ago, he had Black Fox King assume his appearance and sit in the palace. He left the imperial city and embarked on the journey to find the Great Light Temple. As he had expected, the Great Light Temple had sent another monk after their defeat in the northern demon battlefield to inquire about the whereabouts of the previous monk. He had secretly followed him for a few days and then deliberately gave the information that Kuwen is dead and the Saraira is in the hands of Prince Shenwu. Soon after, a monk from the Light Monks returned to report. He quietly followed the monk back. Then, in the deep mountains of the deep cloud fog sea, he saw this ancient temple hidden in the fog. During the days of observation, as long as he did not expose himself, he could completely hide his aura and quietly observe in the dark. The Great Light Temple was divided into the Great Sun Palace and the Hall of All Life. The Great Sun Palace was located at the peak of the mountain, and this was the Palace of All Life. However, the ancient scripture was different from the Xian technique, so it was stored in the Hall of All Life for the monks to read. In addition, no one in the Great Light Temple could find it. Although there were patrols at night, they could not find Xia Ji in the darkness. He had been reading these scriptures for 7 days and 7 nights, and the skill orbs were produced one by one. The Great Light Temple's heritage was not as complete as the dilapidated Thunderclap temples. Every time he chose, he would pick those ancient scriptures to read, so his gains were naturally great. In the dark, he had already absorbed many of the Great Light Temple's legacies. He had obtained 2 golden skill beads, treasured son of heaven's body. He had obtained a golden skill bead, the 9-yang heart sutra. There were also many purple and blue colors. So, his essence, chi, and spirit had all reached the limit. He was only missing an opportunity to create his own style and truly ascend to the sky that he had yet to reach. Considering that it was almost time to go south, he decided to pack up what he hadn't seen. Chapter 86, 81. You and I are both caged birds. Chapter 86, 81. You and I are both caged birds. Xia Ji walked under the moonlight of the ancient temple. The masters of the Great Light Temple were mostly cultivating in the Great Sun Hall. Although there were many monks of light from the Palace of All Life, none of them could discover him. After all, no one would have thought that someone would steal the scriptures instead of the mystic arts. What was the use of stealing scriptures? Xia Ji came and left silently. Tomorrow, the monk of Great Light Temple would discover the missing scripture, but he would already be thousands of miles away. After stepping into the wilderness, he raised his hand, and a huge shadow fell from the sky under the moonlight. A golden eagle descended from the sky and crouched at his feet. Who said that one had to take a carriage to go south? He stepped onto the eagle and patted its wings. The eagle immediately flapped its wings and flew up. It was late at night. Spring was chilly and the night wind was bone-piercing. Xia Ji sat on the eagle's back. The remaining distance was point to point. He could ignore all routes and reach the south as fast as he could. This was what he wanted. When his 8th sister, who was good at observing qi, woke up, he would have arrived at his destination. She must have set up many ambushes along the way, but sorry, her plans were going to be disrupted. Xia Ji sat on the falcon, occasionally taking out a piece of meat from his dark gold cloak and throwing it forward. The falcon raised its head and ate it, then sped south without stopping. Now, his dark gold cloak had expanded to 3 cubic meters. It contained a string of 3,000 worlds, a string of 1,008 magic worlds, a string of 108 worries, and 20 strings of 14 basic Tathagata prayer beads. Other than that, there were also his great dark heavenly halberd, beast-faced devourer consecutive armor, some pills, food, and many other essential items. The sharp cry of an eagle pierced through the sky, and then passed through the night and dawn. Xia Ji passed through the mountains and rivers. After 7 days, he had completed the 8,000-mile journey and arrived at the north of the great river ahead of time. Early spring was the time when the snow and ice melted. Looking down from a high place, the great river surged and never returned to the east. It was as if the great regret of life could no longer be made up for. The falcon circled the clouds a few times, and Xia Ji observed the scenery below. He was not in a hurry to enter the city, but rode on the falcon and looked down from above so that he could see it clearly. Usually, he would camp with this eagle demon on the mountain peak. There were many wild beasts in the forest in the early spring. He hunted some wild rabbits and made them into roasted meat. He ate half of it himself and gave the rest to the eagle demon as a reward. At night, he took out his tent and rested in it. Then, he took out the Great Light Temple's book collection and continued reading at night. 2 days passed like this. On the 3rd day, at dawn, a huge 5-toothed warship broke through the waves of the river. The warship had 5 floors and was more than 100 feet tall. Its flags fluttered like clouds. The middle-aged man standing at the bow of the ship was wearing a dragon robe. He had an extraordinary temperament and looked down on the world. Xia Ji immediately recognized the emperor, Xia Taiqian. He was here to see Tianzi. It was considered a success now. Presumably, the crown prince would face many obstacles on his way here, but these had nothing to do with him. He had already found his target, so he was just waiting to meet him. Xia Taiqian stood on the deck at the bow of the ship, accompanied by several guards in embroidered robes. The waves rolled. Tianzi suddenly raised his head and looked at the golden clouds. Xia Ji patted the eagle demon's head and let it fly higher. An eagle and a boat, one in the sky, one on the water, moving forward together. The five-toothed warship docked at the largest dock in the northern city, and there were already many soldiers lined up outside to welcome it. Xia Ji waited patiently. He had too many questions to ask Tianzi. Night fell. Tianzi had already moved into the temporary palace. The moon was bright tonight. Tianzi dismissed all the guards and then quietly enjoyed the wine in the courtyard. The eagle demon flapped its wings, and a strong wind blew on the ground, causing people to squint their eyes to avoid the sandstorm. During this time, Xia Ji had already jumped down from a high place and landed on the glazed roof tiles of the palace. Tianzi was pouring wine. Under the moonlight, it was clear that there were 2 cups of wine. "You're here." Xia Ji didn't hide. He jumped down from the glazed tiles and stood in the courtyard. Tianzi's expression was calm, as if he was not surprised that he was here. He pointed to the other side of the stone table and said, "Sit." Tianzi looked up. "We are father and son. It's been 18 years. It can be considered fate. Sit down and have a chat." "Did you kill mother?" Xia Ji asked. "That's right. I absorbed her power, and she died because of it." Xia Ji's tone was already very calm. "Reason. Reason." A mocking smile appeared on Tianzi's lips. He muttered the reason a few times, then laughed with a slightly crazy expression. After laughing, there was no movement from the guards in the distance. "I'm the only one in the palace. All the guards have been driven out. I saw you on the warship today, so I have been waiting for you tonight. You asked me for a reason, so I'll tell you today. Before I ascended the throne, I already knew one thing." He waved his hand, gesturing for Xia Ji to come closer. However, Xia Ji did not move. Tianzi shook his head and laughed. His smile was extremely ferocious. "Seventh brother, do you know that I can't give birth? None of you are my children. Other than those from the same mother, the others are not related by blood. Do you know how I feel in the palace?" he asked with a trembling smile. Without waiting for Xia Ji's reply, he growled, "Caged sparrow." Then, he poured himself 2 glasses of wine and said, "Do you know what a cage is?" "An aristocratic family that has been around for thousands of years," he growled. "Do you know how I rose to the throne when I wasn't the crown prince? The aristocratic families killed the crown prince and all the other princes and sent me, this puppet, to the throne. Do you know why the aristocratic families want me to ascend the throne? Because I was the one who kept the lowest profile among the princes. I looked the easiest to control, and I was also the one who couldn't have children. Do you know why the aristocratic families want an emperor who can't give birth?" Tianzi became more and more deranged, and there was a hint of laughter in his tone. However, this smile was a little scary. "Because they want to seize the world. Do you understand the nature of the 9 dragons competition for the throne? Essence, essence, it was a division of the world between the aristocratic families. However, the aristocratic families do not keep trash, so other than a few concubines, none of you know. The aristocratic families want to see who is the strongest among you." Tianzi's every word was a shocking secret. However, he was still not satisfied and drank cup after cup of fine wine. "Xia Ji, do you know my feelings for you? I want every single one of you to die, every single one of you to die tragically. So, why should I care about this world? The more tattered this world is, the happier I am. What does the invasion of the outsiders have to do with me? What does the common people have to do with me? Could the common people be considered humans? Was there anyone else in this world other than these 1,000-year-old aristocratic families? Driving the tiger to swallow the wolf and watching the aristocratic families fight each other is my greatest pleasure. By the way, do you know why I want to see you and why I want to say so much to you? You think you can beat me?" Xia Ji asked lightly. "No, let's not fight for now. I'm just telling you one thing. I'm sure you'll be very happy to hear it." Tianzi leaned forward slightly and smiled. "Your mother was abandoned by the family head, so I dealt with her. You and your sister have also been abandoned, which is why I left you in the imperial city. What's even more interesting is that you've already been labeled as a demon and an anomaly. They see that you have the ability and want you to be a greedy wolf to accomplish their goals. What's the purpose? Jin also does not know. I know that I want to share this happiness with you, because you are the same as me. No matter how you struggle, you are a bird in a cage and can't fly out. Ha 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 ha. Chapter 87, 82. God Slaying, 1. Chapter 87, 82. God Slaying, 1. Unfortunately, they only know that I obtained the Mountain River Nation suppression art from the ancestral dragon, but they don't know that I have a second ability, the dragon devouring art. This can completely swallow the power of others. Although there are limitations, you can't imagine the accumulation of my power over the years. Tianzi smiled and opened his arms. Do you have hatred in your heart? It's right to have hatred, and so is Zhen. Then let me devour you and let you reunite with your mother. Let your power become a part of me and destroy these aristocratic families. My mother's surname is Su, Xia Ji said calmly. Her name is Su Lin Yu. Is this aristocratic family you're talking about, the Su family? But where was the Smiths? If you want to eat me, I might be able to bite you back. If I bite you back, I'll still go to the Su family. You should tell me about it. Where? Tianzi laughed coldly. I have spent 30 years and still haven't figured out this question. But I can tell you that the reason why I can kill your mother is also because of the special permission of someone in the Su family. It's just that that person doesn't know that I ate her. What about the other aristocratic families? Xia Ji asked coldly. The emperor said, there are 5 great families in the world. You have 9 princes and princesses. Su, Wu, Zhou, and God Lu. There are 5 families. I won't tell you about 6th brother, but 6th brother is a truly pitiful child. He's so pitiful that even I can't bear to see him, but I can't eat him either. His current state is neither male nor female, neither human nor demon, neither immortal nor ghost. It's better for him to die. However, Xia Ji, you're going to be like 6th brother in a few years' time. You've been abandoned, your mother is dead, and your roots in the Su family are gone. I can guess that the aristocratic families have already reached a deal. They have already chosen a true new ruler. This is the chosen one. And you are the whetstone of the chosen one, the sacrifice, an evil path that can't be washed clean no matter how hard you try, an anomaly that everyone wants to kill. Do you want to debate? Do you want others to acknowledge you? Impossible. This is the name they gave you. Justice. Law. Are you dreaming? You are destined to be imprisoned by them on the divine pillar, suffering all kinds of pain and torture, and then turn into ashes. Old 8th Supreme Heavenly Mirror had already shown out. They were the destiny, they were the gods, and you couldn't change anything. I am the same, so I actually admire you very much. You were able to endure in the Sutra Library for more than 2 years and then break through the fatal tribulation. It can be seen that you are quite scheming. However, ever since I became their puppet, I have been enduring for 30 years. Come, let me end your tragic fate. Let me eat you and become a part of me. After saying this, Tianzi stood up. His eyes were filled with madness as he looked at the young men in front of him, as if he was looking at the most delicious and nutritious food in the world. They were not father and son. At this moment, only one of them could survive. Let's fight somewhere else, Xia Ji said. Eastern Zhejiang, the emperor replied. All right. The 2 of them had already finished their words. The end was slaughter. 2 black shadows broke through the cold spring night. Their hearts were cold, so cold that they did not feel like they were in the mortal world. In the dark shadows of the houses, there was a family in every house. Every family lived in their daily lives and did not need to bear these hurtful truths. The shadow of the mountain was like an evil ghost lying on the ground. The long ridge in the eastern suburbs was like a ferocious beast that was hundreds of miles long, looking at the human world with a sinister smile. Let's do it here. Xia Ji landed in a valley. The valley was very large, and the surrounding mountains were oppressive. However, the interior was empty and very spacious, which was very suitable for fighting. Tianzi was also very satisfied and stopped. The evening wind was cold. It was so cold that her heart was empty. I hope you taste as good as your mother. Tianzi licked his lips. Xia Ji wasn't angered. He said calmly, I have a technique that I've been thinking about for a long time, but I'm still lacking a bit of an opportunity. You gave me an opportunity just now. Although it's not complete, As a token of my gratitude, I'll let you see it first. Very soon, it will be mine. Tianzi smiled. Then, he thought. Tianzi stomped on the ground. Its body seemed to have fused with the mountains and rivers. When it moved mountains. When it lifted its feet, it overturned the sea. The great power on it caused the originally weak Tianzi's body to suddenly expand. The dragon robe shattered. The dragon's fragile body broke inch by inch. His body directly grew to 20 feet tall. His arms were mountains and his body was the sea. This was the power he had obtained from the ancestral dragon, the mountain river nation suppression art. This was the first Dharma. He thought again. The shadow of a giant silver dragon appeared and circled around him. It suddenly rushed into the sea and roared until a pair of extremely cold eyes stared at the enemy quietly. Then, he let out a long roar. If it were a mortal, they would have knelt down just by looking at the dragon. The power on it was so terrifying, but there was a hint of familiarity to it. This was the power that the emperor had obtained after eating Su Linyu. This was the second Dharma. Then, the outside of the dragon Dharma suddenly burned, turning into a fire domain phantom. The fire domain was like a dream, like a real, like a fake, making people unable to see it clearly. However, just looking at it would make them upset. There were even holy maidens dancing, spinning, and jumping vaguely. When he opened his eyes again, there was no such thing as a holy maiden. Instead, it was a beautiful and exposed demoness crawling on the pink flames. She was moaning softly and slowly crawling. She was looking at him and beckoning him with her fingers. No matter who it was, as long as they hadn't reached the Dharma stage, or if they had reached the Dharma stage but couldn't stabilize their minds, they would have lost their minds the moment they saw the flaming phantom. The shadow condensed into a Dharma idol, but it was unknown whether it was a spiritual Dharma idol or a true Chi Dharma idol. This was the threefold Dharma. Then, a golden light appeared outside the flame Dharma. The golden light was extremely dazzling and collapsed inward, instantly hiding all the Dharma from before. This was the fourth Dharma. Tianzi was no longer Tianzi. He had become a dazzling golden sun. All of a sudden, the clouds in the sky danced wildly. The ground and even the surrounding mountain walls could not withstand this power and began to emit clear cracking sounds. Tianzi was no longer where he was. He had already disappeared into space. The world was only left with a series of bangs, but the emperor who had endured for 30 years was nowhere to be seen. However, no matter where he was, he would be able to devour Xiaji the moment he appeared. Xiaji's expression was calm. His spirit river had completely fused the skill bead into a golden bead. That was because he had instilled too many emotions into her. Every word that Tianzi said subverted his understanding of this world. Understand clearly. Only then did he understand that there really was destiny in this world. There really was a God. 1,000 types of 9th-tier skill orbs, the highest spiritual inheritance of the ancient Thunderclap Temple. Why couldn't she be happy after having so much? He sighed softly and looked at everything that was crumbling under Tianzi's violent power. Then, he flipped his hand. He folded his hands. 2 fingers had already picked up a Dharma idol. This Dharma idol was a mixture of hell, the sun, the Ming King, and the crow in the lotus sun wheel, but it was not dazzling. It was just like an ordinary flying knife, defying the heavens and slaying the gods. Chapter 88, 83. Opening of the show, 1. Chapter 88, 83. Opening of the show, 1. All that I have gained in this life is given to this knife. He didn't ask about the common people, nor did he ask about ghosts and gods. He only asked about himself. You've endured for 30 years and played the role of a coward for so many years, but you're still a bird in a cage. My future is uncertain, and the truth that I thought I found has been overturned once again. There is no way out. Heaven is not heaven, and the human world is not the human world. The gods are above, and the destiny is above. In my opinion. The violent airflow exploded. The sound shook the surroundings. The earth, mountains, and rivers in all directions were cracked under the pressure of this emperor. Moonlight poured into the crack. That's all. Xiaji raised his head when he said those words. He couldn't speak in a fierce battle because he would be discouraged if he did, but he did, because his saber had already moved the moment he opened his mouth. Wherever the blade went, the emperor would be there. The mountain river nation, this kind of majestic power suddenly appeared from high above and pressed down on him. It was a four-layered Dharma idol formed by mountain river, white dragon, and golden light. The Dharma idol turned into a fist, and the fist was power. Tianzi wanted to take power, but he could only clench his fists. Pathetic. Xia Ji added. This was a man's sympathy for another man. No matter what, he had endured for 30 years. He was a real man. Unfortunately, he did not know that these 30 years had worn away his fighting spirit and courage. Even though he clearly had great strength, his fists had already softened. The fist of the fourth-level Dharma landed. The throwing knife was also shot out. This slash was a combination of all the techniques. This saber move contained all the power of the four elements. With this slash, the three Buddhas were shattered, leaving only a young man. The blade was not sharp. Compared to the pressure caused by the fist, it was almost non-existent. However, it had already passed through the fist and the person behind it at the fastest speed. When Tianzi realized how terrifying this strike was, his right fist had already been split into two halves. Blood and chi rushed out from the two halves to block it. But the knife, destroy everything, Mikor il kolil inu. It pierced through Tianzi's forearm and pierced his heart. It came out from his back, bringing with it a pool of blood. It was like a dream bubble, and then it dissipated. Xia Taiqian fell to his knees and coughed a few times. He could not believe it. He did not believe that he would lose. Otherwise, he wouldn't have met Xia Ji alone. But he lost. Death had come. And he finally accepted reality with difficulty. His face instantly became extremely old. His voice was hoarse. What's this move called? God Slayer. You created it. No, you created it, but this knife is not perfect, or you wouldn't have seen the knife. Amazing, really amazing. Why aren't you my son? Xia Taiqian spat out a mouthful of blood, but he no longer clutched his chest. It was useless. He fell back onto the ground, his heart had been cut off by the blade. The body that he had barely condensed earlier had exploded into a bloody mist. The last wisp of blood was being transmitted to his body. Although he had deliberately slowed down the speed, once it was transmitted, it would be death. What's the ancestral dragon? Xia Ji suddenly asked. This was an important question. If the ancestral dragon was an item unique to the royal family's bloodline, then the other princes and princesses were not of the royal family's bloodline either. Why would they have the ancestral dragon's empowerment? Xia Taiqian glanced at the young prince with a strange expression. He was so intelligent that he could deduce the whole picture just by looking at the tip of the iceberg. If Xia Ji met the ancestral dragon would naturally tell him the whole story. In other words, he had not been enlightened by the ancestral dragon. Even Xia Xiaosu had not been enlightened. Otherwise, Xia Xiaosu would have told him. This meant that the ancestral dragon, was it a trap? Xia Taiqian's face was filled with sorrow, but he forced a smile. Come here and relax. I'll pass on my memories and power to you, and you'll know everything. If you win, help me kill them. Xia Ji saw his strange behavior, saw his sadness, and heard his words. However, he did not step forward. Instead, he said, a dying man's words are kind. Is this your last words? Xia Taiqian knew that his thoughts had been seen through, and he laughed at himself. He no longer looked at Xia Ji, but looked up into the sky and sang, whether it was right or wrong, success or failure, everything is gone. The green mountains are still there. The sunset is red. 30 years of fame, 30 years of dreams. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, Xia Ji, kill them. At the end of his sentence, he roared out the last 4 words with a power that was close to a roar. Then, his voice stopped abruptly, filled with endless hatred. He no longer had anyone to entrust him to, and could only entrust it to the person who killed him. Then, his head tilted and he fell into the dust. His eyes were staring fixedly and refused to close, as if he was waiting for the person opposite him to agree. Xia Ji didn't help him close his eyes. There were many people who died with grievances, so he just kept them open. He looked up at the moonlight and thought of the woman who had carried him for 10 months and had given birth to him. That woman was very beautiful. Her long hair reached her waist, and she was full of immortal aura. She was devastatingly beautiful. That woman would tell him stories, cook him iced plum and wild jujube soup to cool him off, protect him carefully during the autumn hunt, prepare winter clothes for him, and kneel in front of others to plead for him. You raised me when I was young, and I raised you when you were old. Unfortunately, they were separated by the yellow springs, and life and death were boundless. He could not do it himself. A thought flashed through her mind. Mother, I've avenged you, he said softly. But not all. The tree wants to be quiet, but the wind won't stop. If they want to use their son will follow the clues and catch them. Rest well in the netherworld first. I will send many people down to accompany you. He took out 3 incense sticks from his dark gold cloak and lit them with his fingers. At this moment, a fire suddenly appeared at the entrance of the valley. Around the deep valley, the walls were hundreds of feet tall, and the sound of hurried footsteps could already be heard from the slope. Since Tianzi was a bird in a cage, then such a bird in a cage naturally would not lack people to watch over it. However, now that the chosen one had been chosen and the destiny had been determined, this Tianzi was useless. If he died, so be it. They might be looking at who was more suitable to be a whetstone, themselves or Tianzi. The dark valley was clearly illuminated by the light from the entrance of the valley. On the mountaintop around the valley, the flames coiled like red pythons, looking down at him. The mountaintop was filled with soldiers. The person who entered the valley was a handsome monk with peach blossoms on his face. The moment Xia Ji saw him, he knew the monk's identity. He was the monk that the crown prince had seen in the emperor's royal study, and he was also the one who had caused the defeat of the 100,000-strong army in the Wolf Ceiling Pass. In that case, it was not only the emperor who had killed the crown prince and released the outsiders, but also the acquiescence of the aristocratic families, right? Amitabha. A Dharma name exploded like thunder. You killed your father. The monk shouted angrily. There was also a commotion among the tens of thousands of soldiers. Everyone saw Tianzi lying in a pool of blood and the youth standing beside him. Xia Ji recalled the words of the dead men in front of him. This is the name they gave you. There was no need for evidence. He didn't need anything. You are whatever they say you are. Wasn't this right? It was because they were strong and you were weak. If you tried to prove that you were right, it would only make the crowd laugh. It is a sin to be weak. Xia Ji didn't answer. He looked at the handsome monk and asked, Have you ever seen the bliss of the Western Paradise? Chapter 89, 84. Get down. Chapter 89, 84. Get down. A smile appeared on the handsome monk's thin lips as he raised his voice and said, This poor monk is Kuming of the Great Light Temple. Greetings. He paused for a moment, then slowly said, Greetings to this disloyal, unjust, and unfilial number 1 heretic. After saying this, he retreated a little. In the distance, a giant shadow that was like an iron tower was like a meteor. It flashed for 1,000 feet. It was obvious that it had just arrived in a hurry. It was a monk with bronze skin. Even in this cold spring night, he was still shirtless. The monk was holding a string of black prayer beads in his left hand and was rapidly moving them. The prayer beads were very long and filled with profound intent. The monk was very fast, but the speed at which his left hand moved the prayer beads was as slow as a needle. It did not change with the speed of movement. The body moved fast, but the heart did not move, so it was slow. After he landed, he stood beside the handsome monk and said in a low voice, This poor monk is Dorj of the Great Cold Temple in the snow region. Dorj meant Vajra in the local language, and this monk deserved this name. Why are you here, monk? Xia Ji asked. The tower-like bare-chested monk said in a low voice, Have a question for you. If there are people in the world who slander you, bully you, humiliate you, laugh at you, despise you, hate you, or lie to you, what should you? Without waiting for Xia Ji to reply, the monk continued, Giver, you only need to tolerate him, let him be, avoid him, tolerate him, respect him, ignore him, and stay for a few more years. Just look at him. The monk advised me to endure. That's right. Patron, you still have one more option. That is to enter the void gate and recite scriptures to reflect on your mistakes. If Patron agrees, this karma will be dissolved today. Xiaji looked at the monk in front of him, and a scene suddenly appeared in his mind. For many years, Tianzi, who had fallen at his feet, might have experienced this scene as well. He was heavily surrounded. In the dark night, many people were looking at him. He drew his sword and looked around blankly. The world was vast, but it could not accommodate him. Then, the figure gave him a choice. You still have one option, and that is to become the puppet emperor. If you agree, you can live today. Xia Taiqian would definitely agree. Once he was suppressed, he would not be able to turn over a new leaf for 30 years. When he finally turned over a new leaf, the other party only loosened his grip on his palm and allowed him to break free. Presumably, if he lost today, that palm would very likely suppress him again. The five-finger cage was nothing more than this. Xiaji took a deep look at the monk before him and suddenly said, "Let me ask this monk a question too." "Please," said Dorje. Xiaji said, "If the monk sits in the temple quietly, his meals will be served by a beautiful woman. She has been serving him for 10 years. How is he?" Dorje subconsciously said, "Don't put the women in your heart. The older women should naturally see themselves as their mothers. The older women should see themselves as sisters. The younger women should see themselves as sisters. Therefore, there's no need to do anything." Xiaji nodded. "What if one day, this beauty has feelings for me and wants to hug me while there's no one around? What should I do?" he asked. Dorje put his palms together and chanted softly, "Just like a dead tree leaning against a cold rock, like 3 winters without warmth, my heart naturally won't move or waver. What difference does it make if it's a girl or a boy?" Xiaji laughed and pointed at the monk in front of him. "Vulgar. Vulgar. Vulgar." Dorje was stunned, but he was proficient in Buddhism after all. He thought about it and suddenly realized where the problem was. However, his words were like water that was poured out. He was about to say a few words to make up for it. But Xiaji didn't give him the chance. He directly used the dermic dhyana. This kind of monk's will was extremely firm. Unlike the eagle demon, even the broken void could not be broken directly. One had to find a flaw and pry open a crack in his heart to break it. Now was the time. "How can a common man be qualified to persuade me to endure?" he said loudly. "He's just a lackey of the rich and powerful." These words were like a dagger that pierced into the monk's heart. The mental power contained in them was like a rolling wave that hit the dam and hit Dorje's heart. He used his strength to resist. Xiaji activated the lion's roar technique and shouted, "Get down." As soon as the 3 words were spoken, it was like a meteor flying from the vast sea of stars, cutting through the vast night and shattering the heart. Dorje spat out a mouthful of blood and took a few steps back. This scene was extremely abrupt. Ku Ming, who was standing at the side, finally realized what was going on. He was stunned. Dorje was already injured after just a conversation. He was stalling for time, waiting for the 3rd person to come. This highness was very strong, even Tianzi was killed by him, so he had to be careful. Therefore, when he saw the 7th prince speak, he thought that it was exactly what he wanted, so he did not care. However, he did not expect that with just a few words, he would hurt a general of his side. Dorje was no ordinary monk. He quickly replayed the conversation between the two of them and immediately understood where the problem was. Of course, monks shouldn't get close to women, but after cultivating for so long, they didn't even cultivate a little compassion. They were only afraid that they wouldn't be affected by karma and that they would stick to the precepts. 10 years of care, was there really no karma? Dorje's words, like a dead tree leaning against a cold rock, only like 3 winters without warmth, was really as His Highness said, a vulgar man. Ku Ming immediately became alert. What a powerful Zen machine. Dorje was indeed careless, but it had to be said that His Highness' words were like a knife. The blade slashed at the body. His words shattered his soul. Amazing. Ku Ming turned his head and saw Dorje sweating profusely. His lips moved quickly as he hurriedly recited the scriptures to restore his state of mind. The Zen heart of ordinary monks had long been shattered, but Dorje was not an ordinary monk. At this moment, the sound of a breeze blowing through the grass came from behind him again. It was like a flying dragon flying close to the ground, shocking the night and the wind. In the blink of an eye, a middle-aged man in embroidered clothes landed beside the handsome monk. This middle-aged man had a dignified appearance, and his brows were filled with confidence. There was also a trace of power in him. Long Shao greets the Son of Heaven of the Sun Palace, the secret guardian. Greetings, Alliance Master Long. Ku Ming put his palms together. Long Shao was about to say something when he suddenly felt that something was wrong. He turned his head and saw that the pagoda-like monk had blood on the corner of his mouth and sweat on his forehead. He was muttering something as if he was injured. Long Shao was speechless. His expression changed. This Master Dorje was a Vajra of the secret trace. He was one of the 20 heavens of Buddhism with the same name as Kumingi of the Great Light Temple. The so-called 20 heavens referred to the Great Brahma, Sakra, Duowen, Chigwa, Zengcheng, Guangmu, Secret Traces Vajra, Great Freedom, Medicine, Fork General, Miaoing Fairy, Lakshmi Fairy, Wei Tua Deity, Earth Goddess, Bodhi Tree Girl, Gizi Mother, Marizi Heaven, Sun Palace Emperor, Moon Palace Emperor, Seiji Dragon King, and Yemo. Just as he was in a daze, many swordsmen in white had already passed through the long grass in front of the valley and arrived. These were Long Zhao's attendants. There were a total of 49 people, but they were arranged into a small sword formation according to the number of Tiangang and Beidou. Naturally, they were not his most powerful subordinates. The powerful ones had already been sent to the north to intercept this Prince Shenwu. Who would have thought that he would suddenly appear here? How did Master Dorje get injured? Long Shao finally couldn't help asking. He couldn't understand because he was sure that they hadn't fought with the prince yet. Chapter 90, 85. I'll teach you. Chapter 90, 85. I'll teach you. Ku Ming instinctively wanted to say sharp-tongued, but he swallowed his words. If sharp-tongued words could make the secret guardian vomit blood, wouldn't that be belittling his own people? Dorje advised the demon to enter the void gate, he said directly. Unfortunately, not only was he ungrateful, he even set a trap for Dorje. Long Shao raised his eyebrows. He roughly understood that this was not the case, but he naturally would not expose it. He was someone invited by the fifth prince. The fifth prince was a rising star of the righteous path, and the person behind the fifth prince was even more powerful. Therefore, he needed to come personally. He had originally thought that the seventh prince would have to go through all sorts of obstacles before he was qualified to stand in front of them. He had not expected that he would suddenly appear, which could be considered to have disrupted their plan. The original plan was useless. They just called him general, king against king. His Highness was a legend, but wasn't he? The two heavens present were even more legendary. According to the division, they were all at the 10th realm. Legends had their own pride, so Long Shao did not wait any longer. The original plan had been broken by this sudden appearance. There were only the 3 of them here, and the follow-up soldiers were the main force. The 50,000-strong army had long been lying in wait in the north. Now that they had rushed here and sealed off the valley entrance and the mountain peak, the prince was truly at a dead end. He turned to Ku Ming, wanting to ask who would go first. However, when he turned his head, he saw Ku Ming standing beside Dorje with his eyes closed, silently chanting scriptures to help Dorje recover. Long Shao had already closed his mouth and smiled. There was no need to ask. The leader of the righteous path, who was dressed in embroidered clothes, walked out and walked towards the youth who was wrapped in a dark golden python robe. He said gracefully, "Mountain River Sun Moon Tower, Long Shao." Xia Ji had heard of this building before. It was said to be the most supreme building in the righteous path. He also knew this person. This was the leader of the righteous path. Interestingly, the Alliance Master didn't claim to be the owner of the Mountain River Sun Moon Pavilion. You should know who I am now. This Long naturally knows your highness. Originally, this Long did not wish to interfere with the matters of the royal family. Unfortunately. Then don't bother, Xia Ji interrupted. Today, we will only talk about martial arts, not justice, Long Shao shook his head and said slowly. Xia Ji laughed out loud. He was a sensible person. He couldn't live with his conscience, so he said that. All right, he replied. Today, he was here. He did not run or hide. Now that the show had just begun, he asked, "What do you want?" "Let's do as your highness says," Long Xiao said. "If you do as I say, you won't have a chance to attack," Xia Ji said. Long Xiao's expression turned cold and he said, "Prince Shenwu is so arrogant. I won't take advantage of you. I'm best at techniques, and my strongest sword technique is one move, the godly grace of the clock of destiny. This move can be considered as all the techniques in the world and can break all the moves in the world. If this move is used together with the transcendence mystic art, it will be almost invincible. Since I started my career, there are less than a handful of people in the Jianghu who can force me to use this sword. They are all great heroes in this world, but unfortunately, they have all been defeated." Xia Ji waved his hand, signaling for him to attack. "You've struck after striking," Long Xiao said. Xia Ji nodded. "We'll decide the winner and the loser. We'll also decide life and death." Long Xiao understood the situation. "Naturally. This style of mine is throwing knives," Xia Ji said frankly. "Hidden weapons." Long Xiao smiled. He had once sat under the rain in spring and cut off every drop of rain that fell on him with his sword. He had also asked his subordinates to throw hidden weapons at him from all directions. He could also use his sword to strike after the enemy and shoot down the hidden weapons one after another. Legends were also humans. Although their strength was terrifying, they were nothing more than force, qi, and spirit. The gods could not attack directly, so they had to use force in a game of chess. With energy, there would be turnover. No matter how strong a person was, there would always be a time when the old strength had just been exhausted and the new strength had not yet been born. When he attacked with his saber, he would also attack with his sword. He drew his sword, broke the saber, and beheaded the enemy. It was done in one go. He had already thought it through. At this moment, Ku Ming, who had been chanting, suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the direction of the battle. A dangerous light flashed through the gap. His back was facing the two of them, but his right hand had already begun to quietly form a seal. His left hand had already quietly reached into his bosom and grabbed a lotus stem. Xia Ji didn't say anything else. He raised his hand, and the wind in his palm swirled like a vortex. In an instant, a long blade of grass had already entered his hand. Flying flowers and plucking leaves to hurt people, turning withered grass and rotten wood into soldiers, these were basic operations for legends. Xia Ji pinched the long grass with 2 fingers and filled it with qi. The grass straightened up like a sword under the moonlight. Long Xiao wasn't careless. His expression was ethereal, and his soul seemed to have dispersed. His right hand held the sword hilt, while his left hand turned the sky upward. His 5 fingers naturally grasped the air, and his thumb and forefinger were interlocked, moving slowly along with the airflow between heaven and earth. Calculating the world. Soul-chasing sword. This was the creation bell Shenxiu. Tens of thousands of soldiers watched the duel. The current silence was the prelude to the raging waves. Xia Ji's fingers moved slightly, while Long Xiao's fingers on his left hand moved quickly. This was his feeling and calculation. Xia Ji moved again, and Long Xiao suddenly frowned. With that thought, Xia Ji's hand was like the toughest and crudest slash in the world. With a slash, the long grass spread forward along his arm, elbow, and 2 fingers. The leader of the orthodox martial arts world couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. He could cut off the raindrops and shoot down the hidden weapons because everything had a pattern, and the cultivation technique also had a pattern. As long as there was a pattern, he could break it. He wasn't wrong. Prince Shenwu's attacks were indeed rhythmic. But how many rules were there? How many moves did he use in a split second? 1,000 moves into one, countless changes, and endless patterns. His brain worked to the limit, but even at the limit, he still could not catch up to the speed of Prince Shenwu's hand. The long grass left his hand and flew towards the embroidered alliance master. Long Zhao's Adam's apple bobbed as he felt a sharp pain in his head. The attacks he had used to break through many moves rushed into his brain, but they collided with each other until his head buzzed. He couldn't calculate it, and he couldn't calculate it anymore, so he drew his sword. His sword struck the grass like a cold bolt of lightning. He was still confident. At the same time, Ku Ming also attacked. He had been waiting for a sneak attack, and now he had the chance. Scorching currents filled the sky. He pushed out his right hand, and a scorching wave of fire shot toward Xiaji, accompanied by the sound of air burning. The 9 suns and the 9 yin contained the sky scroll and the earth scroll. The sky scroll cultivated qi while the earth scroll was a skill. This was the fire cloud palm of the 9 suns. The waves of fire were dazzling, one after another. Before Kumingren arrived, the qi had already traveled more than 300 feet, rushing toward the Prince Shenwu who had just exhausted all his strength. After throwing the flying daggers, Xiaji stopped looking. The same genuine qi shot out from his pores in both his arms to block the red heat wave that swept over from afar. Wherever the heat wave passed, the new green was burned, and the sand looked like an earth dragon rolling under it. The same 9 suns true qi shield suddenly opened, and the airflow formed a shield that collided with the waves. Wave dispelling. The barrier shattered. However, Ku Ming had already accumulated his momentum during this passive welcome. He appeared in front of Xiaji, raised his hand, and the Dharma idol of the Son of Heaven behind him appeared. He held a lotus flower in his hand, and the crown had a sun wheel in which crows flew. The 9 suns merged into one, and the sun shone brightly. The crow also flew out with this attack, piercing through the 9 suns and enhancing them, barely fusing the 9 suns into a vast and mighty sun. The blazing sun was pushed towards Xiaji along with the palm. His speed was extremely fast, and he had a good grasp of the time. In the eyes of ordinary soldiers, it would only take 2 scenes to freeze and flash. If they blinked, they would not even be able to see it. Xiaji could only block in time. Prince Shenwu was sent flying backward. The blazing sun exploded into rings of fiery clouds that chased after the prince for more than 200 feet before falling. A loud bang echoed in the valley. Ku Ming's sneak attack was successful. He then had the time to turn his head and glance at Long Xiao. The leader of the martial arts circle was kneeling on the ground in pain. The confidence in his eyes had been shattered by a long blade of grass. He grabbed a porcelain bottle with his right hand and poured pills into his mouth. His left hand was covering his chest, and blood was seeping out between his fingers. Ku Ming's eyelids twitched. That was where Long Xiao's heart was. Did the long grass shoot into Long Xiao's heart? He didn't even manage to block it. Was this kid really that powerful? He had to be extremely careful. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, a sound came from the other side. Ku Ming suddenly turned his head and looked at the smoke and dust in front of him. A tall and sturdy figure slowly walked out, becoming clearer and clearer in everyone's sight. The figure's black hair had been scattered and was casually draped over his shoulders. In the cold moonlight wind, he bared his fangs and brandished his claws, showing a hint of arrogance. As he walked, he opened his arms. 9 dark red fiery suns lined up from his left hand to his right hand, and a Dharma idol similar to Ku Ming appeared behind him. Lotus flowers, sun wheels, and a Buddha statue with crows flying in the air. However, Mes Monana statue was Dluarie in Kaurana 100 Kia even more lifelike. Its pupils were Xiaji's pupils. If it were an outsider, they would have thought that this was a spar between the disciples of Great Light Temple. However, the handsome monk could not help but waver even though he was calm. Treasure son of heaven body. Where did you learn it from? No, at your level, Ku Ming was shocked. He almost blurted out, "Are you a senior of Great Light Temple?" But no matter how he thought about it, he felt that something was wrong. Secretly learning. Could he learn a higher level than him by stealing? He had already reached the 9th level by relying on the enlightenment technique, while the prince in front of him had clearly touched a higher level. Even if he had not reached that level, he had already taken a step forward. It was called half step to the 10th level. The 10th level was heaven ascension. It was the power of a celestial being. It was the realm after transcending the Dharma stage. Was this still stealing? Compared to him, he was more like a thief, right? Xiaji's calm voice came from the dust. You don't use the 9 suns that way. Do you want to learn? I'll teach you. Chapter 91, 86. 10th Yang. Chapter 91, 86. 10th Yang. Xiaji had digested the Great Light Temple's cultivation technique. Whether it was the treasured Son of Heaven body or the 9 Yang Heart Sutra, they were both in the state of 2 skill beads stacking. In other words, they were at 9 to 5 levels. The only difference was the final step. However, the Baori Son of Heaven body had a special effect. Unlike the defense of the unmovable King Ming body, the function of this mysterious skill was to increase the power of fire or yang. As for the 9 Suns true Qi, if he advanced half a step above the half step 10th level, even if he couldn't reach 10, he would be infinitely close to 10. As he walked, he raised his left hand and right hand in an embrace. The first sun and the 9th sun gathered together. Although they were still repelled by a forbidden repulsive force, they were already very close. The 9 suns merged into one, forming the 10th yang void shadow. A blood-colored crow suddenly let out a hoarse cry from the sun will behind him and drilled into the 10 yang void shadow. It sounded like a war drum. The rhythm of heaven and earth moved. Scorching heat rose from the deep valley. The soldiers felt their hearts beating faster and faster. Ku Ming turned around and ran away. He turned into a bolt of lightning and ran as fast as he could. His left hand had already grabbed the lotus stem tightly. He felt a mighty force forming. 10th sun, 10th sun, 10th sun. The calmness on his handsome face was also torn apart, but the shock in his heart was far greater than on the surface. He finally roared in his heart, "How is this possible? How could the 10th sun be formed?" Ascending Sunday. Bright Sunday. It was a blazing sun that belonged to the transcendent. He glanced over and saw that there were still many soldiers in the valley. When he saw the general leading the army, his expression immediately returned to normal. He shouted from afar, "Amitba! The demons are rampant. General! You, quickly defend." When he looked again, he saw Dorje, who had just opened his eyes. The pagoda-like monk had just opened his eyes. Ku Ming had only turned around and shot out a few hundred feet when the 10th sun had already formed in Xia Jit's hands. Following this formation, the faint sounds of drums between heaven and earth also stopped. The next moment, a strange scene appeared. The sky that was still bright and clear a moment ago was now covered in dark clouds. There was almost no pause as a strong wind blew. The heavy night brought with it heavy rain clouds, pressing down on the world like a hand that suppressed an anomaly. Heaven and earth were dark. It was as if even the heavens would not allow such a power to appear at this time. The sky is too dark. Xia Ji's gaze swept across the surrounding valley. Torches in the valley, bright and magnificent. The shield formation has been set up, and the enemy is lying in ambush from all sides. No matter where the blazing sun attacked, it would only destroy one side. The remaining soldiers were still unharmed. Then he suddenly raised his left hand and lifted the scorching sun, which was condensed with high temperature and violent true energy, to the top. Then, he swept his gaze across the dark world and sighed. He said calmly, "Let there be light." As soon as he finished speaking, his palm had already pushed the 10th sun to the ground as if he was venting his anger. He maintained the integrity of the blazing sun true Qi so that it did not explode the moment it touched the ground. Instead, he sent it underground. Immediately after, he gritted his teeth and stubbornly urged his meridians, which had just dried up, to generate genuine Qi for the second time. Then, in a split second, he raised another scorching sun crazily and pressed it into the ground at the same frequency and speed. The first sun had just exploded when the second sun arrived. The two extraordinary berserk powers stacked together, producing a terrifying power. The soldiers who were looking down at the prince were dumbfounded. Dorje, who was far away, finally understood the situation. He understood why he saw the Son of Heaven running away as soon as he opened his eyes. Many swordsmen in white were rushing toward Long Shao, but were they in time? Long Shao looked at this shocking scene. His confidence that had been shattered by that blade of grass had turned into ashes. Crazy, crazy, really crazy. The valley suddenly trembled violently. After a short pause, after a moment of silence, the earth shook violently, and the yellow soil surface was like a sack that was filled with air. The air increased until it finally burst. In an instant, it was riddled with holes, and thousands of flames soared into the sky. It was not just the flames of the 10th sun, but the earth fire that had been stirred up by the 10th sun. The long-suppressed fire of the coal seams was stirred up by the flames, forming a large-scale burning. The mountain forest began to shake under the violent true energy and high temperature. Landslide had even begun to occur in a small area. Mud and stones rolled. Although it was not exaggerated to the extent of causing a mudslide, the mountains surrounding the valley had already collapsed, and many trees had already been burned. Xia Ji, on the other hand, borrowed the impact of the second explosion to fly into the air. In the air, he was wearing a python robe and his black hair was fluttering. With a wave of his right hand, he took out the 18-foot-long dark heavenly halberd from his dark golden robe. He added a force to the halberd and threw it toward the mountain peak. At the same time, his right foot stepped on a huge rock that was flying up. With a sudden stomp, the huge rock shot down, and his entire body shot up. In an instant, he stood firmly on the black halberd. The men left with his halberd. It's like stepping on a lonely boat. Like flowing water, it breaks through the air. Soaring between the roaring fire and the thick clouds. The storm finally fell. As soon as Xia Ji landed, his body turned into a black light. He held the black halberd in his hand and killed as if he was cutting grass. Generals certainly have methods to stabilize morale. But under such an extreme environment, how could the general calm down? The elite soldiers only cared about fleeing and became a rabble. Xia Ji didn't face any resistance. He didn't even need to brandish his black halberd. As long as he passed by, he would leave behind piles of corpses. The black halberd was like a sponge, crazily sucking the blood and letting out a joyful moan. In the far north, the imperial capital welcomed an important guest. The name of the Marquis of Ming was Fang Qi. This was a dukedom with real power, and his fief was also near the imperial capital. At this time, he was sitting in the reception room of the side hall of the palace. He was stroking his beard and smiling at the 9th princess sitting opposite the tea table. Pale. Desolation. Small and skinny. Weak. Her hair was fine and soft. Her little face was quite pretty. However, how did this look like the material to be the ruler of the imperial? She was about the same size as the actress he played with at the bar last night. The actress looked better than her. Fang Qie took a sip of hot tea and couldn't help but frown. What tea? It really wasn't good enough. It was not even as good as the one in the residence. However, he was a duke, so he should have some self-cultivation. So he swallowed the tea and threw the teacup to the side. He looked at the princess in front of him and smiled gracefully. I am the envoy of the kingdom of Cheng. I am here to discuss a marriage with the 9th princess. Please speak, Marquis. Haoming, Xia Xiaosu looked at him. Fang Qi said, the eldest son of the Duke of Cheng, Wang Xiao, is handsome and elegant. He's also a literary talent. Both of them are first class. He's a good match for the princess. I'm here today to talk about marriage. How dare you say that? Xia Xiaosu asked. What was the point of a duke trying to arrange a marriage for a princess? Even if he didn't put her in his eyes, what about Tianzi? This is absolutely absurd. But Fang Qie only smiled and stroked his beard, pretending not to understand what he meant. If the 9th princess agrees, the Duke of Cheng will be very happy. The power of the Duke of Cheng's Huang family can be regarded as a huge cauldron that suppresses a region in the northern lands. With his help, the 9th princess will have more confidence in whatever she does, right? Xia Xiaosu looked behind her. A female servant with a gloomy expression ran over and whispered into her ear. Fang Qi did not mind and waited patiently. After the maid finished speaking, she stepped back and stood respectfully behind the princess. Do you know the story of the groundless fears, Marquis Yueming? Xia Xiaosu asked. Fang Qie replied calmly, I know. Qi is the name of the Duke of Cheng's fief. The saying, worrying for nothing, refers to the fact that the eldest young master is good at observing the weather and has the hearts of the people. He worries about the world first. He is truly benevolent and righteous. He had a look of admiration on his face. Eldest young master is devoted to the people. He often hides his identity and hangs around the village. He is very benevolent, which is why the marriage has been delayed. I really can't stand it anymore, so I came to eldest young master to matchmake. Xia Xiaosu said coldly, Wang Siren is 30 this year. He is as stupid as a pig. At poetry gatherings, people recite poems and paint, but he is worried that the sun will fall. Usually, he is addicted to fireworks and doesn't come back day and night. Marquis Yueming, you've done a good job of covering it up. Fang Qi glanced at the maid behind the princess and looked at the princess with a smile. Rumors stop with the wise. The 9th princess is a smart person. Seeing that the princess was unmoved, he leaned over and whispered, "Do you think your brother will be able to come back from the north bank of the river? What are you doing here if you can't come back?" Xia Xiaosu asked directly. Fang Qi casually leaned back and said matter-of-factly, "Help you. The marriage is just a name. If you are connected, you will be an alliance. Do you understand, 9th princess?" Xia Xiaosu smiled and said, "I heard that the 4th daughter of the Duke of Cheng, Wang Yan, is 16 years old. She is quite talented. If you want a marriage alliance, send her painting over. When you come back, I will let you see it. If you are satisfied, I will let Miss Huang marry my brother." Fang Qi frowned and revealed a stunned expression. Huang Yan was the apple of the Duke of Cheng's eye, and she was talented and intelligent. She was valued by many nobles and had a bright future. How could she be treated as a plaything for marriage? No, he shook his head. "What if my brother returns from the northern lands?" Xia Xiaosu asked. "It's still inappropriate. I'll tell you the truth." "Please don't be angry, 9th princess," Fang Qi said with a smile. "The water in this land is unfathomable. What the princess sees is just the foam of the sea. Although your elder brother has the name of a legend and the name of a prince, he also bears many other names." As Fang Shuo spoke, he did not seem to want to beat around the bush anymore. He directly spat out 3 words, "He's not worthy." Xia Xiaosu smiled. She clapped her hands. 2 female attendants with sabers immediately walked in. "I have something urgent to attend to. I'll leave first," Xia Xiaosu said gently. Just as he was about to stand up, the 2 maids had already drawn their sabers and walked towards him. Just as he understood, he hurriedly raised his hand to grab his chest. However, as soon as he moved, the 2 maids had already leaped forward at a ghostly speed and pulled out their knives. One of them was on his neck, and the other was pressing down on his hand. "Princess, think carefully. I'm Marquis Yueming. If I die..." Xia Xiaosu had already stepped over the threshold. Fang Qi was shocked and shouted, "Princess, I'm not Marquis Yueming. I'm his shadow. It's the Marquis. The Marquis asked me to say this. It really has nothing to do with me." Only then did Xia Xiaosu stop in her tracks. Fang Qi panted and revealed his original posture. He bent over, rubbed his hands, and was covered in sweat. This lowly one is only following orders. However, Xia Xiaosu only stopped and did not turn around. "Kill them," a cold voice came from afar. The blade fell. They wailed. The blood light shot out, and red plum blossoms bloomed on one side of the window. "Those who insult me can still live. Those who insult my brother will die." Part 8 of the series ends here. Thank you for watching and listening. If you find it interesting, please give us a like, a comment and a subscription so that we have the motivation to make the next videos.